Hello, welcome to everyone. Today is December 20th, which happens to be the birthday of Professor David Bohm. Professor David Bohm is a major figure in the history of the development of quantum mechanics. He is a physicist and he was a contemporary of Einstein. He is known for many landmark pieces of work in quantum physics. For example, he formulated the spin version of the famous EPR argument. He also developed the hidden variables version of present quantum mechanics. He is known for the Bohm-Aharonov effect and so on. He actually in the 1950s wrote a textbook on quantum mechanics for undergrad and graduate students, which was highly appreciated by Einstein. And he was also very interested in issues that physics pointed at but went beyond physics as he thought. So it was natural that I wanted to invite him for the World Congress for the synthesis of science and religion in 1986 in Mumbai that I was organizing for the Bhaktivedanta Institute. And along with Professor Wilkins, I had written to him, and he also gave me an appointment. Let's say it was on a Tuesday, and on Monday I met with Professor Maurice Wilkins at King's College. And while I was talking to Professor Wilkins, someone opened the door and put his head in, and he said, "Ready to go?" He asked Maurice Wilkins. And I instantly recognized this is famous Professor David Bohm. And Professor Wilkins said, "Well, I have this young gentleman from India here, and he's talking to me, and so I don't think I'll be able to go just as yet." And then he looked at me, Professor David Bohm, and I said, "Professor David Bohm?" And he said, "Yes." Probably he was surprised that I recognized him or something. And I said, I have an appointment to meet with you tomorrow. "Oh," he said, yes, okay, good. So you two go ahead and I'll meet you tomorrow." And then he left. And Professor Wilkins was also surprised that he said, "Oh, you're meeting Professor Bohm also tomorrow?" I said, "Yes." And anyway, so the next day I went to Bohm's office, and he met with me. He was very polite, very kind gentleman. And I have to say that he's one of the most Sadhu-like personalities that I have met in my life. And although he's, is not an explicitly, practicing monk or anything like that. And he said he was not able to go to that conference in January of 1986. And that was the end of my contact with him at that time. Then the conference happened, and then I presented a paper in that conference also on real and artificial intelligence. And because my background was in computer science all along, at that time I was not working in quantum mechanics, and nor did I ever expect that I'll work in quantum mechanics at that time. And by about 87, that paper was published in the book of the proceedings volumes of the conference. And then I went to India. At the time itself, I was splitting my time between the Bombay and San Francisco centers of the Bhaktivedanta Institute. And I think in December of 1987 or something like that, I was going to India. And I wrote to Professor Bohm and sent him this paper and asked whether I could meet with him. And he replied yes, and I went to London, and then I went to his office at the appointed time. And I had arrived for about 5-10 minutes early, so I was standing outside the lobby and looking at their posters and stuff like that, when Professor Bohm suddenly came out of his office, and he saw me, and he came close to me and said, "Dr. Gomatam." And I said yes, and he said, "Okay, I'll be ready in a few minutes." And I read your paper. It's a brilliant paper, he said, and I was very surprised um, that he had read it and he thought well of it. Anyway, then I went and met with him, and he was very appreciative of the paper, um, so many aspects of that. And of course, he was already very much involved with Jiddu Krishnamurti, so he was not unfamiliar with at least one version of the Indian philosophy, which is known as Advaita Vedanta, and of course, Bhakti Vedanta is entirely different. It's a superset of Advaita Vedanta. It includes and goes beyond Advaita Vedanta, and actually, from that time began an association of mine with Professor David Bohm, which went for the next several years until he left the planet. And we used to meet very regularly whenever I went to London. And I have many things to recollect from that wonderful association with Professor Bohm. I'll talk about them maybe in one more video. Maybe for this presentation, I can just recall one exchange we had during that meeting on my paper. Professor Bohm said that upon reading your paper, I infer that you mean to say that the individual consciousness and supreme consciousness are different. Is that so? And I was a little surprised that he was so intelligent as to infer this from the paper, because I had not explicitly discussed the relation between the concept of individual consciousness and universal consciousness in my paper. So I said, yes, that is actually so according to Bhaktivedanta tradition. Then he said, can you explain to me why it should be so? So I said, I can explain, but first I would like to know whether you will be unhappy if it were the case that individual consciousness and supreme consciousness are different and permanently so. He just thought for a few seconds and he said, no, I won't be unhappy. And he said, in fact, I'll be happy, he said. So I told him, so that's very good, so that means you're already a Vaishnava. And we discussed a lot more things that I will recall in my next talk about Professor Bohm. Thank you.